ActionAid Nigeria, in the course of our work in the communities across Nigeria, has had first-hand realities of climate change. We have come in contact with that. In recent years, Nigeria has experienced more frequent weather extremes, sometimes seeing drought. One year and the next you have floods. Rainy seasons sometimes arrive early, sometimes late, or sometimes they are far shorter than usual. And this is why today we are here alongside the small-scale holder women farmers here represented, Activista Youth Platform, which is a platform for young people established by ActionAid, and also Fresh and Young Brains Development Initiative here present, and Environmental Rights Action also here present, with the support from ActionAid Nigeria and ActionAid International to call on the Nigerian government to take urgent and immediate action to ensure that all aspects of the lives of an average Nigerian is climate protected. Around the world and in Nigeria, communities are dealing with the realities of climate emergency. Climate impacts such as drought, floods, cyclones, the rising sea levels, crop losses, and loss of livelihoods are wreaking havoc, wrecking lives, driving up poverty and rolling back the rights of women and children and the young people. And this is terrifying, it's a terrifying reality. A major scientific report released last year by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change showed that there is very little doubt that the whole planet is steadily warming and that Africa is on the front line of climate change. The good news, however, is that governments across the globe, particularly Nigeria, needs to begin to act now. If they act now, they can help to lessen the harm that the extreme weather can wreak on communities. Climate impacts, the impacts are hitting people harder and more frequently. Major milestones such as melting of the Antarctic and the Arctic poles are happening far sooner than scientists predicted. The planet is heating up and even more quickly than expected. This means that far severe impacts and climate change disaster are just around the corner. If the global community and the world governments, especially Nigeria, if we do not act together and now to transform the current economic model that is so harmful to our planet in terms of its health, or to implement strategies to become more resilient to the impacts, we will likely be locked into escalating temperatures in which survival will be very, very difficult.
What we're actually asking for is action. It's high time we stop paying lip service to matters surrounding climate change. We're talking about the need for us, a lot of countries, developed countries, are going green, rather than prospect for oil and things like that, or even those who have nuclear plants, for instance, closing down theirs. But what is Nigeria doing? We're investing more money in prospecting for oil. Prospecting for oil, even though some people have, a lot of scientists have said, or experts have said, it is bad for the climate. But even if you look at our track record, how do we manage the waste from these petrochemical plants? We have very bad track records. Now, besides even prospecting for oil, we're also thinking about going nuclear, erecting nuclear plants. If we can manage the waste from hydroelectric dams that we have, for instance, how can we manage those from nuclear plants, or nuclear reactors? It's worse. So what we're saying now is the government should sit up and do something, not just pay lip service to the issues around climate change. We need to set up policies. What are we doing to help save the planet? You drive around the streets, you see cars emitting carbon monoxide, which is harmful to the environment. What are we doing about it? Nothing. You go to some areas in the Niger Delta, and you see gas flaring going on, unabated. On several occasions, they talk about the need to stop that. Well, what have we done? Nothing. the companies, the oil companies there are very selfish and greedy because they know they can actually stop gas flaring, but because they know it will cost them more money to manage these emissions, they rather let it go out there. It's even on record that every year in Nigeria we lose about 2.5 billion naira worth of gas when we flare them.
It is an obvious fact that this government is looking at agriculture. But how well are they doing it to see that their budget or their aim is being achieved? Owing to the fact that agriculture is a seasonal thing here in Nigeria, and climate is a great factor that will be managed, how well are we being aware of the climate change? What is the impact of our early warnings to rural farmers? Sometimes last year we started to say, okay, there should be placards that can translate into languages that will enable the rural women know what they are talking about. Because if you discover there's a lot of wastage as a result of climate change, sometimes you aim that, okay, let's start this farming, and without you knowing what is happening to the rain, lack of awareness sets in. And when you farm at that point, you discover that this thing won't germinate. Because you do not have idea of what the weather is like, it's become a problem. So even knowing that the climate is there, we should also be able to know that any warning system should be, the information should be down-rooted to the rural women so they'll be able to digest and know how to plan their farming season. Last year, we planted beans. Last 2 years, we planted beans, and virtually all of us lost the beans. Why? Because there was early stoppage of rain. If we have this information that rainy season is going to stop before the normal time, we discover that we either plant earlier than that or we do not plant, because no one wants to put his efforts and lose these efforts. We are saying that government should step up in climate change. We should step up in disseminating information with regard to climate change and providing security to that.
Indeed, our organization, FBIN, is glad to be part of the global climate strike because we realize as an organization that climate change is no respecter of persons. Yeah. It affects all of us directly or indirectly. And a few days ago, I was talking with some of my friends, and they said maybe Abuja should start thinking of a change in the meaning of FCT, that is becoming like flood and cow territory. And that summarizes what we're experiencing. While we're having the cows right now on the streets of Abuja and in some other parts of Nigeria because of issue of climate change, they're looking, the herdsmen, the pastoralists are looking for grazing land for this. And while we're having issues of flood, because you see that most of the estates, especially in Abuja, for instance, if you go to Lokogoma, I know sometime last month, one of the directors lost his life around Galadimawa Junction, all because people are building on waterways. And the question is, who gave them the permission? So climate change is not something that should be domiciled alone in the Federal Ministry of Environment, the Climate Change Department. It is something that has a multi-sectoral approach that must be adopted. I know sometime 5 years ago or thereabouts, the Nigerian government came up with the NAPA, the NASPA, the National Adaptation Strategy and Plan of Action on Climate Change, and a whole lot of organizations were part of it. And each organization was meant to look at it from their own perspective. The government agencies, the ministries, and departments were part of it. Now, for instance, you can't talk about climate change with what is going on without bringing in Ministry of Urban Housing and the rest of them. We need to begin to look at it. It's still in Nigeria that you come to some places and you're seeing still people using things that are not eco-smart, they are not eco-friendly. So it's something that we need to have that consciousness, as much as we're calling on government to step up, because there's a whole lot. Nigerian government committed to the Paris Agreement some years back, and they submitted our nationally determined contributions on climate change to the UNFCCC. What have we done? And I know some of the key things that were in that document is climate change mitigation, adaptation, and climate resilient agriculture. Now we talk about agriculture. Nigeria has not yet recovered from the 2011 flood that happened, especially that cut off almost part of Lokoja, that reptiles now left their homes and enter the human homes. So these are the things that we need to, we shouldn't be reactive in nature, we should be proactive. So joining ActionAid and other partners, what we are saying is that as much as we know that in terms of policy, environment, government needs to take a lead on it.
You know, there's too much of rain, there's too much of sun. When the rain when the sun is too much, the average young person cannot go out to work because you need to sell something and you need a clear weather for that. Now when the sun is too much, you try to go out to hustle or to sell, you're also affected by that because you could get sick. Now bringing it down to children, I saw pictures on Facebook some time ago of a bridge that was washed away by flood. I think that bridge was the only bridge in that community, and these children have to go through this bridge to school every day. And that day it was as if the bridge was already bad due to the excessive floodings, and some of the children fell into the river and lost their lives. Now, if the communities were aware that actually the water was getting too much and was getting uncontrollable, they would have involved the government. Or maybe the government is aware, but let us assume they are not aware. These are issues that affect us from the old man to the young person.